Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much. My name is Denise Maringolo. I'm the acting director of the Dresher Center for the Humanities, and I'm also an associate professor of history and a scholar of public history. We are so delighted to be with you here today in person and online, and we welcome those of you who are watching on YouTube. Today's event is part of the Spring 2022 Humanities Forum organized by the Dresher Center for the Humanities. We're honored to host this talk by the distinguished president of our university, Dr. Freeman A. Hrabowski III. Before we begin, I'd just like to make some announcements. First, I want to acknowledge that UMBC was established upon the land of the Piscataway and Susquehannock peoples. Over time, citizens of many more indigenous nations have come to reside in this region. We humbly offer our respects to all past, present, and future indigenous people connected to this place. While we recognize the importance of acknowledging those who came before us, we also know that truth-telling is only a small gesture, and we must take action towards the necessary work of repair. I want to thank the Office of the President, the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, and the Department of Africana Studies for co-sponsoring this event. Today's event is the Daphne Harrison Lecture, named after Professor Emerita Dr. Daphne Harrison, former chair of the Department of Africana Studies and the founding director of the Humanities Scholars Program and UMBC's Center for the Humanities, which is now the Dresher Center for the Humanities. Daphne Harrison came to UMBC in 1972 as an associate professor of Africana Studies. She was an influential educator. During her tenure, she spearheaded a 2-year effort by UMBC and Baltimore area school teachers to engage in meaningful dialogue about racism. She also served as the founding director of UMBC's Center for the Humanities, a position she held until her retirement in 1999. A scholar of music, she wrote a number of articles about the blues and published a path-breaking book entitled Black Pearls, Blues Queens of the 1920s. As a professor and faculty colleague, Dr. Harrison worked creatively with many departments and campus groups beyond her home department, including what is now called Gender, Women's, and Sexuality Studies, the Music Department, the Meyerhoff Scholarship Program, and others. She said, "I love teaching and enjoy challenging students to be imaginative, to take risks, to stand up for what is right regardless of peer pressure. As a result, I fell in love with every new group of students that walked into my classroom." As the first director of the Center for the Humanities, she worked tirelessly to mentor the undergraduate humanities scholars and to support humanities faculty across the campus while inviting challenging and dynamic speakers to campus for the Humanities Forum. We're grateful for her creative and foundational leadership, which we honor every year through this lecture. Now, allow me to turn the podium over to the Dean of the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, Dr. Kimberly Moffitt, who will introduce Dr. Hrabowski.
Well, good evening. And thank you so much for being here this evening. Dr. Freeman Hrabowski has always shown his commitment to the humanities on this campus. He's often said to us that we cannot be the great institution that we are without the humanities, and he's right. And I share that to also inform you that back in 2007, I don't know if you know where I'm going, Dr. Hrabowski. In 2007, a visiting assistant professor sent Dr. Hrabowski an email inviting him to come speak to her sports and media class because she had a classroom full of student athletes who said, quote, "Dr. Hrabowski doesn't care about us as athletes nor about sports." I was determined to prove them wrong, so I sent this email in hopes of inviting him to come talk to the students, in which he did. And imagine my surprise when he agreed to join the class, and by the end of that class session, you know where I'm going with this, He had won over most of those student athletes who then felt, leaving that classroom, that they had been heard, that they had been seen, and that they belonged. This is the Freeman Hrabowski that most of us know and have grown to love and respect, and for whom we are grateful for his commitment to UMBC, but also to the humanities. Dr. Freeman Hrabowski III has served as president of UMBC since 1992, and as we all know, will now retire in July 2022 after having built UMBC from a commuter college for many students in surrounding counties to a dynamic university that is seen as a model of inclusive excellence, full of innovative research and teaching by its faculty members, and now with its newly designation as a Research One institution. Just to name a few of his accolades, in 2008, he was named one of America's best leaders by U.S. News and World Report. Time magazine named him one of America's 10 best college presidents in 2009, and one of the 100 most influential people in the world in 2012. More recently, he received the American Council on Education's Lifetime Achievement Award, and the list goes on and on. He has also served on and serves on the boards of the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, the Franz Marek Foundation, Margaret Casey Foundation, T. Rowe Price, the Urban Institute, as well as McCormick and Company. Dr. Hrabowski holds over 40 honorary degrees from universities in this nation, including Harvard, Princeton, Duke, University of Michigan, Georgetown, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and even locally, Johns Hopkins University. He is well known for his work with philanthropist Robert Meyerhoff, who he co-founded the Meyerhoff Scholars Program in 1988. The program is open to all high-achieving students committed to pursuing advanced degrees and research careers in science and engineering, and advancing underrepresented minorities in these fields. The program is recognized, again, as another example of a national model that happened here at UMBC, that we now see several programs modeling themselves after the Meyerhoff program, including the one at Duke University. Most recently, Dr. Hrabowski published, along with two colleagues, The Empowered University, Shared Leadership, Culture Change, and Academic Success with Johns Hopkins University Press, which examines how university communities support academic success by cultivating and empowering institutional culture. He walks the walk, he talks the talk, and then he expects us to do the same. Dr. Hrabowski also demonstrates to us his commitment to humanity by seeing the humanity in all of us. And I think for many in this room, especially those faces that I recognize, we all have stories to tell. My brief story is Dr. Hrabowski has continually shown up for me personally and professionally, most recently, and not even so recently, but certainly over the years in terms of supporting me through the loss of both of my parents, and seeing himself sometimes as a surrogate father, and I only say that because it's only a couple of years difference between us. He just looks young and looks very well for it. But I just want to acknowledge that it is an honor and a privilege to be able to stand here and have an opportunity to acknowledge him, to extend my gratitude for all that he has done for me personally and for what he has done for many of us in this space. And I now want to step aside so that you all have the opportunity to hear Dr. Freeman Hrabowski.
Thank you, Dean Moffitt, very much. Good evening, good afternoon. Perhaps it's even evening. It's good to see all of you here and those who are streaming with us today. I wanted those students in Dean Moffitt's class to know that I did care about them. I really did. Those of you who know me know that I'm not the #1 expert in athletics, though I care about our students and I want us to do well. I begin with poetry. Let me first, though, thank both Denise and Jessica Berman, both of them, for what you've done in helping us in building this center, what you're doing right now. Well, Jessica's here somewhere for being here today. We appreciate that. There's something to be said about these centers that started during our lifetime at the university, whether it's humanities or departments. Carol McCann, and I mean, some of you may not know, there was a time when there was no Department of Gender and Women's Studies and Sexuality, and how people fought to help people understand what that would mean. And there are others that same way. But I begin with poetry. All of you know I'm influenced by my parents and my mother, the English teacher, and her favorite author was Zora Neale Hurston, who wrote the book, Their Eyes Were Watching God. And the book begins, ships at a distance have every man's wish on board. For some, they come in with the tide. For others, they sail forever on the horizon, never out of sight, never landing, until the watcher turns his head away in resignation. His dreams mocked to death by time. That is the life of men. And my mother would say, and women. And she was talking about two groups of people. People like us, people whose dreams in many ways have already been fulfilled. And then people whose dreams are, in the words of Langston Hughes, forever deferred. And I have said over and over again that the difference between those two groups primarily is education. And to the extent that we appreciate the meaning and the role of the humanities in our lives, we begin to understand how we must be ambassadors for helping children and people to think, to read, to dream about the possibilities. I heard some news today I heard many things today that I'm going to mention, but I heard some news today that brought me both joy and it was a bittersweet moment. I'm walking to the building, and one of our professors, who just received so many awards, the Frederick Douglass Award and the Condell Award, and says, you know, I'm leaving. And I said, you're leaving? She says, I'm putting this in the car, but I'm leaving UMBC. I wanted to stand because I'm so proud of Professor Cos. Would you, Marlene, would you please stand? I'm very proud of you. I'm very proud of you. And let me just say that I'm going to be a big boy about this and say it is with joy that we send you off to MIT. We seem to be a producer of people for MIT these days. Not a bad story to tell for a university, number one, but you have done. And she said something that was so powerful. She said, Freeman, I've been here 28 years, right? Which is true. You deserve to do whatever, right? And we are so proud of your history. And she represents the best of our humanities and social sciences. And it's just such a special, and I just wanted to get that out so I could say it like a big boy and not sound like I'm sad. Because one of the points that that my colleagues and I make in our book, as people leave, and wonderful people have moved on, is that we're such a family that we tend to feel bothered when people leave. And yet, that's good because it's about the love, but it should also be about the pride in their achievements around the world, that they still belong to us, because she'll recruit some students from here and research collaboration and all kinds of things. I begin with that story from my mother, who grew up in the 30s, and she served as a child maid. And I've told the story over and over. I can never tell it enough. I am a firm believer that storytelling is fundamental to being human. It's what we do. It is the way to connect to human beings. I'm going to end with a couple of stories, including some things that Orianne and others heard today in our President's Council and then in the Faculty Senate meeting. But my mother's story was that she worked in this home, and she had a choice of working in a hot cotton field in Wetumpka, Alabama, or going to work in a wealthy white home. And she wanted to see how wealthy people lived. And the defining characteristic of the home, different from her own, was that it had a library. And Mother was curious about the books. And the woman was kind enough to say, Maggie, let's choose a book for you. And they did. And she said, take the book home and begin reading it, and let's talk about it. And every day, she would talk with my mother about this book, even as Mother was working around the house. And all of a sudden, my mother's girlfriends became angry with her because they would say, come on outside and play. And she said, no, I want to keep reading this book. And they would say, what? It's not school time. Why would you want to be reading a book? And she had to think about that, and she realized something that shaped her future. She realized that the more she read, the better a reader she became. And the more proficient a reader she became, the more she enjoyed the experience. And the more she enjoyed it, the more reading she did. And what she realized about her friends was that she would watch them reading for school, and they would be using their lips and frowning, and then they'd push the book aside and say, that's not interesting. They never got into it. They never learned enough to have a level of comfort that they would begin to enjoy to read. And that's when she knew she wanted to do something special, the most noble work of all, to become a teacher. To become a teacher. And some of us have had mothers who were teachers, many of you in this room, and she always said, we teach them all. And she wanted to teach English and literature because she said, language is powerful. And she said, you learn about human nature, Freeman, when you read novels. And I've used that story over and over, and I want to add one piece to it. Years ago, my dear friend Lucille McCarthy said to Freeman, I enjoy you talking about the reading, but don't forget the writing. Don't forget, because remember, I've been talking to school boards around the country, to groups of teachers, math, English, whatever, and she said the writing also. And I read a quote from David McCullough, the author, who said that writing is thinking. To write well is to think clearly, and that's why it's so hard. And it's so important. And so after Lucille, and I'm actually doing something in honor of her just because it was such an important point that my mother made, and I never even listened to her. I saw the reading, but she was always critiquing my writing, always. When I gave the president's speech here as an installation address, my mother said, give me your speech, let me look at it. Now, I would not give it to her before. I said, how dare you, right? I'm a president. She said, I don't care if you're president of the United States. I can still give you feedback, right? So she didn't do it before, but she did give me feedback after, and she gave me a solid B. She said, this is good. This is very good. And she made a point that I want to see. She said something that you've heard me say, but success is never final. This is so good, and it can always be better. Always remember that, Freeman. Whatever you write, whenever you speak, you can always improve on it. And so that's my mother's story, and she did teach for 40 years. And then my own story you've heard before, sitting in the back of the church, age 12, not wanting to be there, and listening to this gentleman at the lectern say that if the children participate in this peaceful protest, all of America will understand that even our kids know the difference between right and wrong. And my only thought was, and he then said, and they can go to better schools. Now, we had some wonderful black teachers. We did not have the resources. And at the time, we were using a lot of hand-me-down books from the white schools after they had used them, torn up books. And we were not allowed to bring new books into the school just because we'd be different from other kids. So we were being told every day that we were second class. It was not a good feeling. And I wanted to see what those white kids had over there. And people were always saying we were not as smart. And to me, smart meant being excited about the work, curious, and asking questions and working really hard. I wanted to see how I compared. And so I did go. It was a frustrating experience. Of course, that gentleman was Dr. King. And the message was this, that tomorrow could be better than today, but we had to feel empowered to be a part of that change, to believe that we did not have time simply to be victims, but we needed to be a part of the change while we spoke the truth, while we talked about racism and structural discrimination and those kinds of things. But most important, the lesson for me, and one that my parents taught me both through our faith but through literature, was that if we can help children and young people and ourselves to have a sense of self, to believe that we can do all things if we work hard, and to believe that tomorrow can be better. We can accomplish so much more than if we simply allow ourselves to feel like we're victims, whether we are or not, that we had to see ourselves as going beyond what the country might suggest we could do. And it really was literature that helped me in so many ways with the books, all the way from being punished using characters from Dostoevsky in middle school, and I halfway understood private punishment, but I had to read it and give point. And she would punish me when I was being arrogant using the word Raskolnikov. Okay, Raskolnikov. All my friends would say, what is she talking about? And I was embarrassed because I knew, right? Or when she talked about the Invisible Man or the Native Son, and she talked about Mr. Bledsoe or about Bigger. So we use characters in books to represent characteristics and behavior, which was a wonderful gift that my parents gave to me. I tell you that because after going to jail and after having the opportunity to represent the children in the Children's March and learning more about writing what I experienced and speaking, I began to put in perspective that period of the 60s. Many of our students today will say, we've never been this bad off, that the country's never been more divided. And my first reaction is, there are some things that are unique, but look at the 60s, either the 1860s or the 1960s. And this is where the importance of history is so important, to give context to what we're talking about. Even before the 1860s, when people talk about the leaders in D.C., well, we all love the production of Hamilton, but imagine a vice president killing the former Secretary of the Treasury. Just think about that, what that says, right? Or when the Southern Representative Brooks from South Carolina takes his walking cane and begins beating Senator Sumner from Massachusetts in Congress. My point is this. We know slavery, we know all those things, but the fact is that we've been divided before. And the same thing in the 60s. While people may talk about John Kennedy and Camelot, he got very little done in legislation. It took that Southerner, the master of the Senate, Lyndon Johnson, to bring about all that legislative change that occurred right after the Children's March and right after the awful killing of my little friends, the little girls in the church, and after the assassination of President Kennedy. And what did we get? Within a matter of 2 years, we got the 1964 Civil Rights Act, we got the 1965 Higher Education Act, we got the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And in many ways, some things at least changed. Now, when I talk with people about these similarities, and the historians in the room will appreciate this, I'm always going back to Shakespeare when he said something about what's past is prologue. And when we think about the Spanish flu in 1918 and COVID, when we think about the voting of women and the 19th Amendment and the challenges involved in the voting of women and the fact that blacks, many did not get to vote even into the 1960s, and then we look at what voting rights problems are today, the challenges in our society. When we think about discrimination, whether it's about gender or race, LGBTQ, immigrants, religion, people of disabilities, we see how we make progress and then we move back. We make progress and we assume something, the rights of women, right? For their bodies, who would think that in 2022 we would be where we are right now? And this is, and I say all of this not to be depressing, but rather to say we must teach our students to appreciate history, the actions that were taken at different points, our Center for Democracy, the Dresher Center, the work we do in student affairs, to work with students, the work we do in our classrooms in the humanities and the social sciences, to put problems in perspective, to be able to breathe deeply. It was my friend Fred Lawrence, the Secretary of Phi Beta Kappa. And some of you know all of what we went through to get Phi Beta Kappa on this campus. It wasn't just always here. And there are so few among the 4,000. We are among a small number. But he talks about the role of higher education. First, to teach our students to think critically. And that, for me, that means communicating. That does mean reading and writing clearly and speaking and analyzing the critical thinking skills, and to be able to present our arguments with evidence. And then he talks about the need to be able to listen to other points of view and to look for the evidence that either backs up or does not back up what that point of view is saying. And then the courage to find the common ground and to think about those values that are most important to any of us. We've been doing that at UMBC a long time. The American higher education story, the story of UMBC, the period of the 60s, I would call all of that major part of what we would consider our story, UMBC's story. We were founded in 66, the charter in 63. Columbia, Maryland was founded in 1967, so right in that same period. Columbia was the only place in the South where people of different races could marry. In fact, Soledad O'Brien came to campus and told the story of her parents. Her mother was from the islands, was black, her dad was Irish, and they were grad students at Hopkins, but they could not live in Baltimore. The only place they could live was Howard County, okay? And so many of the students who came to this campus, because of military and people coming from other places, you see that interracial background on this campus. And you see from the beginning, we were the only campus in our state, remember we are the South, where students of all races could come from the beginning. And race has always been something we talked about. Nowhere in the country do we talk about it totally comfortably, but among campuses, we've done better than most. In our classes, in the humanities, social sciences, in the arts, we talk about imagining America. We talk about diversity. The Mellon grants that we've gotten from what Jessica got, Jessica and her colleagues with that one that they had several years ago that we've still worked on involving diversity, to the one that both Kimberly and Pat McDermott and others worked on with the other two campuses. All of those humanities grants focused on issues of inclusivity and how we should be thinking about what we learn from the humanities and social sciences that can help us in thinking about inclusion in different ways. And I should say right now, one of the reasons that we have been so fortunate to get Research One, and I know this to be true, is that we were able some years ago with support from all of you, from people pushing us to do more to invest in the humanities, social sciences, and the arts, right? All the way back to the building. I came in here and I got a little teary thinking about somewhere where there's one of the dance studios or something in this building that's next to a toilet. And the performance would start and the toilet would flush. And some of you were kind enough to tell me, Freeman, bring the legislators by this when they come so they can hear the flushing of the toilet in the middle of a performance. And while this is a decent space, it is a bit far from the other space where the wonderful orchestra performed last night, all right? And I thought about the fact that it was because of pioneering faculty, working with staff, with administrators, that we kept pushing to get more funding and support for the arts, humanities, and social sciences. And the reason we got Research One, make no mistake about it, was that we became more comprehensive in the look of creative arts and research and humanities. So give the arts, humanities, and social sciences a big round of applause, please, for that. And Professor Carr's, Mary Lane, it doesn't hurt to be able to say, and our faculty are so good, MIT keeps stealing them from us. Wait a minute, we need more money for the faculty. I will use your story to try to get more money. I'll tell Valerie to use your story to get more money for faculty salaries. Big round of applause for faculty salaries. Wait a minute. But the fact is, and this is what I want to make as the main point, that our purpose as we think about what we do in higher education is to talk not just about access. This is what we talked about in the 60s and 70s, access to higher education. That's just the first step. The point is, what about success? And what should success mean? And I would say there are two levels, and I've written about this in an article at one point called Beyond the Numbers. First, we have to improve graduation rates. We've done that here. We've gone from 35% to 70%, six-year graduation rate, with another 15% who leave because of programs we don't have. And we can feel that we've made a lot of progress. But the other part, and we've increased the enrollment in the last 30 years by 30%, but graduation rates by doubling it from 35% to 70%. And years ago, the reputation before I came to UMBC was it was so good and so hard, most people flunked out. But that's not just UMBC. There's a mindset. When I'm working at Harvard with new presidents, they will say in many cases, what do we do about this challenge that people sometimes think if it's so good, then most people will not make it? You get my point? And this is what we have worked to do here, to help more students across the board to succeed. I want to read another story from one of the founding 4 classes, someone who came in 1966, because they're publishing a book. And it's wonderful because it will give all of you a chance to understand more about what people experience in the first years here. And this is from Dale Goff, who said, just out of high school, and this sounds like a movie, he came to campus to see about a job on the grounds crew and arrived to find Dr. Alvin Kuhn, the founding chancellor, we were called chancellors then, not president, out on a tractor mowing the grass. And the chancellor gave him a job right there. And Dale was so impressed because he said, here's a leader willing to roll up his sleeves and do whatever job is necessary. If I could drive a tractor, I might have been doing it too. But just think about it. The chancellor at the beginning helping with the tractor. Dale went on to a career in international education and now serves as director of Foreign Credential Services of America and is still very involved with this campus and very proud. And they have those stories to tell about when there wasn't much grass, but when people were working together. It makes a big difference. I told you the story about our doubling our enrollment, the fact that, 30% enrollment, major increase in the numbers of graduates, but I also said the challenge is success. The fact is that literally only 37% of 12th grade students in America come up to the reading proficiency level. Not talking about exceeding proficiency. All right, and for minorities, you know it's much worse. We know that in Baltimore City, it's perhaps 20%. We're working with Lakeland Elementary and some other schools there, and people in a variety of programs are working in the schools. But when I think about what we have to do as universities broadly, it is twofold. Number one, to make sure we're doing all we can to support the students who are here and to give them beyond the classroom, beyond the regular things, to say what is it that you need. I know that, and I want to give the Faculty Senate a lot of credit, working with Staff Senate and Student Senates during COVID to hear people talking about their challenges during COVID, the mental health challenges, the child care challenges, and all those issues, and what other things we can do to make a difference, and how do we reward people. I know that both Carol and Oriana are working on an initiative right now to say, how do we reward people when they go beyond the call of duty? Because so many people are involved in service, how do we make sure we are giving credit to that? I think it's so important. And the key here for me is this. We are fortunate to get a number of students who are better prepared. Some who still need help, we know that, who still need help. We know, as I get letters from alumni, that we still need a constant emphasis on writing skills, in some disciplines more than others. But most important, the fact is that we will have a responsibility as we talk about the current commission, as we talk about more the Browning of Maryland and the country, that we will need to do even more in understanding the challenges that children face in our society. Some of you remember when I talked about the quote from Aristotle that choice, not chance, determines destiny, and one of the faculty members said, but what if the person doesn't have the chance to make a choice? Such a powerful question. And there's where it seems to me all the programs that we are involved with through the humanities and the social sciences and others will be more important than ever as we work with the community to make a difference. Perminda introduced me at a Creative Alliance event recently and did a masterful job. She's here somewhere. And I bring it up because I was honored to accept the award, and I don't do this through false humility. I always say on behalf of my colleagues and students, because if I'm getting some award from the Creative Alliance, it's because of what you have done. in the community, in dance, in music, in theater, in the visual arts, and the working with schools and with artists and imagining America. And I think our challenge is to highlight that. Every time our new dean has a chance to bring up cars, she's in President's Council or wherever, she said, what about cars and the alumni at these different events? And this is good, because bad news travels fast. You know that. It takes effort to get good news out. And so recently, when the judges came to campus, what am I talking about? I was so moved when I walked out of the administration building, and we had all these judges of every race, men and women, who had graduated in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and after 2000. Now, I want to give credit in this audience. Every one of them was a graduate of the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. Give yourselves a round of applause for producing judges all over the state. It was very important. And the picture, there's a photo of the dean and me with them that has to be approved by the state before it can be publicized. But you will be so proud to see all of those people who have great stories, some first in their families to go to college. My point to you is this. We have this responsibility for the success of students here, but to reach out to the community. We want to be a model of inclusive excellence. We have done a great job. We've done a solid job with students, not just in representation, but listening to the voices. We can keep listening. This is what we learned through COVID, active listening, letting them know we care, transparency. These are all lessons. Understanding there's more going on than what's in the classroom, as you know, as we think about how to give them support. We know we can do a better job, as every other university in America, in diversifying the faculty. We know that. We've done better, though, in your college, in this college, than we have in the others. We've made progress in a couple of departments in STEM, but we have a long way to go. Just as I would argue, I would challenge this university. We're known as the #1 producer of blacks who go on to get PhDs in the natural sciences and engineering. I'd like to see us become the #1 in the humanities and social sciences. Give me a round of applause for that idea, You can do that in the arts and humanities. I really believe that we've got the students here, we've got the caring. Many of our students go to law school, and it's fine for some to go to law school, but we need to be producing, no offense to the lawyers in the room, but we need to be producing more for the professoriate, so that others can look up and see them and know that it makes such a difference. It was a book written recently by Ron Daniels, and he had me do one of the blurbs for it called What Universities Owe Democracy. And he says this: colleges and universities are among liberal democracy's cornerstone institutions. They've come to be not only the educators of well-rounded citizens, but those who certify expertise, gateways to opportunities. They harness the resources for the betterment of society, and each institution must look in the mirror, as we say in Empowered University, at what we do well and how we can be even better. I would argue that what I said years ago in my TED Talk about the 4 pillars of success in science would apply to any discipline: the arts, the humanities, high expectations of ourselves and students, building community. These are things we do every day. The idea that it takes artists to produce artists, just as it takes scientists to produce scientists, humanists to produce scientists. We pull them into the work. Last night, there was this wonderful piece done by an undergraduate who composed it. His name was Jeffrey, I think. And this wonderful undergraduate, complicated piece. And I knew to the layman's eye it was wonderful, but to hear the composer par excellence, Linda, talking about this, really made the point that there's so much talent. Now, he's interestingly majoring in music and computer science. And the more we can connect the disciplines, the better, I would say. It's the genius of the and rather than the tyranny of the or. I want to stop because I really want to have time for questions. I want you to think about 2 stories from today that I was so touched by. One was when one of my colleagues who hired Kimberly Moffitt as a visiting assistant professor. So Pat must have been chair of the American Studies Department at that time. And she told, I don't know whether she's here now or not, but she told this story of coming to this campus as an adjunct faculty member, as a single mom of a 2-year-old. doubting what was going to be possible, and that this campus embraced her. It hadn't even finished her PhD yet, embraced her. And she finished that PhD, and she talked about how empowering it was that people saw her and listened to her and empowered her to help others. And she got just full for a moment, thinking about all those years ago and how we all adore her today for what she does for faculty and for students on this campus. And the other story, I'd never heard Jack Seuss tell, who's the longest tenured person around. He's been here 40-some years. And he tells the story that he came to campus, and this is what he said: I wasn't just the first to go to college. He said, I had never met anyone who went to college. Now that's powerful. Now this is what I want you to hear me saying. 2/3 of Americans today have never been around anybody they knew, other than their teachers, in their communities to go to college. I want us to feel so privileged that we put ourselves in the shoes of that first-generation college person, because it's only through the liberal arts, through the humanities and social sciences, that we can prepare them to make decisions that will have an impact on all of us. And I close with the story of the little girl of color who was right across the street at Arbutus Middle, the only little black kid in her class. And the May Day tradition, everybody chooses a dancer, somebody to dance with, a dance partner. Nobody chose her. And she's sitting there feeling so alone by herself. And the teacher, the white teacher, comes over and says, would you be my partner? That story touches me every time. And every time I tell it, Adrian cries. She gets, yeah. Now, there's the woman who's the first woman in the state of Maryland to head the Maryland legislature in hundreds of years, at first black, who this past year passed all kinds of legislation to help people, coming out of the Department of Psychology. And there is the point, that education transforms lives. We have done so much on this campus, and the best is yet to come. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Great. So questions, please. Questions from anyone. You know, Hrabowski said when he was growing up in New York, all of his friends' mothers would ask them at the end of a school day, what'd you learn in school today? He said, not my Jewish mother. My mother would say, Izzy, did you ask a good question today? And the practice of encouraging his curiosity made him the thinker he became. So, who has the first good question? Give me a hard one.
Good evening, Dr. Hrabowski. My name is Danae Barr.
Okay.
Actually, my daughter's a Meyerhoff, by the way.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I was in engineering school, College Park, and then went into film and television radio. I'm wondering here at UMBC, because when I came through engineering school, engineering was separate,
Right.
arts was separate.
Right.
Are there any programs where you are collaborating,
Right.
the engineering students,
Yes.
the art students,
Yes.
et cetera? And then when we're going out into the community,
Yeah.
I want to see more cross-collaboration,
Sure.
et cetera.
I think you'll find a lot. I mean, imaging and digital arts, social justice, the work we do with orchids. We've got numbers of our graduates who connect disciplines. I love the fact that one of the innovation of grants involving history and computer science, when they looked at the war of 1861, and which occurred right in the area where Freddie Gray was killed. And they're looking at these themes of poverty and racism and violence, right? And some history students are learning something about computing and programming, and they develop a game that can be used by children. Well, there are many examples of interdisciplinarity on our campus, from those who are in media communications and use of technology, and students like the idea of connecting disciplines far more than ever. I think this is a campus that takes seriously the notion of interdisciplinarity and of individualized studies. That's another major. So you're absolutely right. Absolutely. Thank you. And kudos on being a great parent, by the way.
Just a quick question. As an educator myself and a speech and language pathologist with two parents as a speech and language pathologist, and as an educator, even before COVID, teachers were a rare commodity, leaving the profession. How do you, when you travel across the country, what are you finding as creative and ingenious ways? And perhaps my consideration for a board position was offering daycare,
Right.
obviously salary, but
Right.
I would like to know what your thoughts are about that, keeping our teachers, not that, like you had said, having an increased diversity.
Sure.
But then also frustrated as an educator after COVID.
Yes.
When we realized the disparity of those that were truly suffering and we
Yes.
still couldn't reach.
Yes.
That is a huge issue after having 2 years, and that we came back and did the same thing.
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
speak to us about not just the teacher shortage, but across the country, having COVID, and we need to speak truth to power in terms of we know there are students we are not reaching.
Right.
And communities that we need to do a better job of equity. How can you share across the country what we've done differently in COVID in different districts, and then how we can kind of map that into our programs here?
Sure, it's a great question. And kudos on Cabby's graduating, by the way. Another great parent. We like that. We like that. We do. The 2 or 3 things I would say as I begin to travel around for universities and school systems, those that are more enlightened are trying to listen to what teachers are saying, or faculty, or families of children, okay? We know that from the work we're doing over with the Lakeland Consortium of Schools, that children across the nation went behind, or are behind, as a result of the fact that it's almost impossible to teach a child remotely if there's somebody right there with that child. When my wife worked with my little 10-year-old grandson down in our home in South Carolina, it was really hard. If she wasn't right on him, he was moving other directions. And the children, it's hard, right? That's number one. So unless children were really privileged with educated parents in the home, and it was hard on those parents, but at least they were able to keep them reading and doing some things. But for most Americans, we are behind now. We're really behind. Number 2, people are tired, really tired and frustrated. And I think leaders are going to have to listen to that, to think about policies that can be more respectful of flexibility in a lot of ways, as we think about helping people to move beyond what we've gone through already. And that will mean funding. It will mean more funding to support. We talk here about the current commission and looking at what that's going to mean for supporting teachers and supporting initiatives that bring families into the work. This is what I like about Lakeland. We have the families helping, a lot of grandmothers and mothers helping at the school and starting back in pre-K. Very important. So there's a need to help families, there's a need to help teachers, but at the university level, there's a need for us, and this is a part of what our faculty senate and other leaders are doing. They're saying, this is what we can do to support. We may not have all the money, but there are ways in which we can reward things, support people in the work. And it will be evolving. My colleagues and I are writing another book right now based on things we've heard from town hall meetings here, from meetings with smaller groups about lessons learned. And one of the most important lessons, I can't say it enough, is listening actively with an open mind and not being defensive when you don't hear what you want to hear. And when people say you did that well, you didn't do that well. And you may have thought you were communicating, and some people got it, a lot of people didn't get it. And people feel cynical at this point, and less trust or whatever. You got to hear it, got to hear it. It's what we call retriever courage here. Are we perfect? No, but we are working on it, and we're evolving. The best news for this campus is that we were able to have representatives broadly of the university community on the search committee for the next president. And I am so proud of our campus because the values that were important here came through to the Board of Regents in that process, and we chose a superstar. Would you all give Valerie Ashby a round of applause? Some of the people are in this room right here. So I mean, it's about the listening, and it's saying we don't have the answers, but let's work on it together, and let's come up with small steps to make a difference. We have a long way to go. If you think about it, let me just put it in perspective. The big issues that we all are talking about right now will be what's happening with healthcare and COVID, of course. Issues involving democracy and voting rights, yeah, all right. Immigration and the way people are talking right now, yeah. discrimination against LGBTQ and people of color for the first time ever since a long time. It did happen before Asian Americans, not just blacks and Latinos. Issues against women. We have all those things. Now you add on to that almost nobody is talking about the quality of education other than burning books. So I am not here to be a Debbie Downer. I am simply saying we have to look the problems in the face as we find ways of having our voice heard about education issues and teachers and families and children and faculty. This is a part of the challenge, and this is why things like the Center for Democracy and the work we do in classrooms and others, getting students involved in the civic engagement process would be more important than ever. And I want to say this, it's so important that we give our students hope so they don't just say, why even bother? Look at what's happening. We've got to believe, and I get the hope from what we did in the 60s. Nobody would have imagined my being the president of a UMBC. Just wouldn't have. I didn't imagine it. Even when I got the job, people would say, President, I'd look around thinking Michael Hooker. I would say, me? Right, so I mean, there are things that have happened that should give us the hope to believe that we can do more. And that's the job of educators. Very important. Thank you. Excellent question. Another question? Another question? Come on, y'all.
Hello.
Yes.
How you doing, sir?
Fine, thank you.
My name is Wisdom. I'm a senior here. I heard you talk about, changes being needed in the community. And I understand you've done great work with this school. Like, I've never met a school so diverse, so understanding of many different things, having so many things built, like a mosque for different students and LGBTQ, like representative things. But I've also faced some issues with this school, like personally, with like certain times of racism, and also the incident into which a student had committed suicide due to a staff that was present here at school. I understand you've done everything you can to make this a welcoming environment, but I wanted to know if you were okay with leaving things like this as the next president comes in August.
Sure, I appreciate the question. Give him a hand for speaking his truth. Now, I know the facts, and this is a part of what I wrote in that letter. If you talk to the head of our LGBTQ faculty staff group, they were very involved with us in the situation from the 7 years ago, very involved with us. And we did the right thing. I can sleep at night. I am so sorry. It is so awful anytime somebody takes his or her or their lives, right? But the fact is, the facts are that we went through that and we did the right thing. We really did. Am I pleased with where we are? I really am. I really am. In the context of America, let me say this. There will always be pockets of challenges, different places. I base my integrity and my reputation on the fact that we did the right thing in that situation. And if you talk to the head of the LGBTQ group, who is still here, she would be happy to tell you how we worked together on that. It's hard for people 7 years later to know what happened, right? We can't talk about but so much of it. But what I'm saying is, based on my 50 years in higher education, I know for a fact, as God is my witness, we did the right thing. And I am a man of faith, while I pray for the family, and I'm so sorry about that, I really am. But what I will say is, the reason I can leave with such joy, I know my colleagues. People here care. Was your first name, was it Wisdom? What a name. I like that, Wisdom. We won't forget you, number one. See me as I walk out, okay? But let me just say this, Wisdom. There will always be certain circumstances that may be a matter of personal differences. It may be a matter of discrimination. I never know. But I know this about this campus. I can tell you this. After so many people didn't believe I would make it at UMBC, black and white, who said he'll be there a year as president. They were people from off campus who had never seen a black president of this kind of place in the Baltimore area. And they just knew I was short-lived, that this was about checking the box, okay? The only reason I'm still here is that I believe in my colleagues. of every race, all types of backgrounds, Muslims and Jews and Christians and those who don't believe in religion, and LGBTQ, and our people from other countries. And I have talked to so many, thousands. And deep, deep in my heart, I know the people here care about you. I can look you in your eyes and tell you that, okay? Does that mean we don't have problems sometimes? In any situation, when you go to work, you're going to find some problems, yeah. But overall, the soul of this place, the soul is amazingly authentic. The soul of this place. I've seen it on so many levels with students and illnesses and deaths and protests and everything else that people care wisdom. They really do. And if you're still having challenges, we can always we can find you somebody to give you support. Know that too. I want you, and I would like you to know more about some people before you leave here, because I want to make sure you send your child here one day. Okay? I want you to send your child here one day. I really do. But see me after this and we'll walk for a minute, okay? All right. Anybody else? Yes.
I have a question, Freeman, about what's happening around the country with legislators who are deciding that we should be not teaching about America's racist past, about things that have divided us.
Yes.
Do you see in your travels around the country that college presidents are concerned? Because I'm seeing very little public reaction.
Yes, yes. It's a great question, and I'm giving talks in all parts of the country. I'm giving 4 or 5 commencement addresses, and I'll be talking about some of that. But Wesleyan, for example, I'm giving a talk at Dartmouth, but in the South. And there's several things I would say. That we must talk about speaking the truth of our past, the truth of where we are today. That to the extent that we can say it calmly, but look people in their eyes and say, I know we care about people, okay? That the truth is, there's no denying the fact that from the beginning of the history of our country, there was what people call the fact that people who came from Africa were inferior. That the scientific establishment helped to promote the idea of the inferiority of people of color and of women. These are facts, and so there's no disputing that. And I say that for this reason. Just as we're concerned about this evidence and truth matter now, it's not as if things were so great way back when that people did not necessarily speak or buy in to the truth about the value of humankind, of people from different backgrounds. Things said about women or LGBTQ, so many things that we as human beings have to evolve on that we have not had right. And it is up to us to speak that truth, but to do it in a way that gets away from any language that makes it the hot button so it's all emotion. That's why I always just say when we get to CRT, that's a legal law school thing. I just want to talk about the truth. I want to talk about the truth of the history of our country and the fact that one of my forebears was a slave master who took advantage of my great-great-grandmother. Yeah, that's the truth. And I kept the name because it is my history, right? Or the fact that my great-great-grandfather gave us land and furniture as the Polish slave master. Not a pretty picture, but the truth, you see. So being able to tell the stories in different ways and to pull in some people. The same way some of you've worked, whether it was building up a program in gender and women's studies, everybody wasn't on board. People didn't want to give it the credibility. We were doing the research, right? The feminism literature, Carol would give me books to read, right? I mean, the same thing. The advanced program that we have, the issues that we talked about with, I'll never forget Professor Herring talking about needing more black full professors because there's so few, and needing to do something about it. And we brought up 3, and one was raised to become the dean. I'm very proud of that. And the other 2 left us somehow. And we got that challenge again, if you get my point, of finding more. But I'm saying the truth in each of these situations. It seems to me no presidents have a responsibility. I'll be teaching new presidents this summer, and we'll be talking about these things. They want to talk about these things and what they can say. They want to know what you say to a wisdom when he says what he said. And the first thing I say is, wisdom needs to know I care, that I care, okay? And that we can talk about it. and I can give you my truth as I see it. Not that I expect him to agree completely, but he will hear my authenticity, right? And it'll have him thinking about it. And that's what I want. That's all we can do with anybody. Because in our classes, remember, our classes are filled with people who represent a microcosm of the state, which means this country. Which means some may agree with some things we say, but others do not. I went through a major period of questioning myself as I worked to connect with students who had voted differently, whose families had voted differently from me. Guys who would pass me and make comments about the fact that my president was no longer, they knew I was close to Barack, to President Obama, and would make comments just quietly and then pulling them in, and they're thinking I was going to try to punish them. No, but my approach has always been to say, let's just talk about it. That we can disagree and I can still be your president and care about you. But let's just be able to talk. We've got to find the language, the approach to talk with people in the Midwest, for example, in the Deep South, who have deeply rooted points of view. When I would go and speak anywhere in the Deep South, including in my state, and they would say I chaired the Obama Commission, I would get everything but booze. And I needed to find a way to connect with them. And often I did it through my mother. You find the connection, the story that makes them calm down and think about perhaps we have something in common. We need more of that. We need to teach our students and ourselves. Because the South, this is a sweeping generalization because there are many educated people in those parts, but we know geographically the South and the Midwest tend to think of both coasts as being condescending. You know what I mean? And we've got to find a way to reach each other. And there are fewer educated percentage-wise in some of those parts. But that is our challenge. And presidents have a role to play. That is your point, and I agree with you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good evening, Daphne McClellan. I came to Maryland to be on the faculty here in social work years ago, and I love being here in Maryland. So I was one of the people who thought you'd be a short-termer, but only because I didn't see how we could hold on to you. I just thought you would be going off to some bigger and better university, maybe not better, but definitely bigger. And so I just think you've done a tremendous service to Maryland and to UMBC by staying here all these years.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I have two questions. One was, I was just really struck by your statistic that 2/3 of people don't know someone or who's college educated, and I'd like to read more about that if you could give me a reference. But secondly, I'm very interested in your thoughts about virtual education and COVID and all the online universities and things these days, because I just really love teaching when there's students in the same classroom with me. I have, of course, like everybody else over the past couple of years, I'm an adjunct now at the University of Maryland School of Social Work, and I've been doing these online classes, which don't seem at all as satisfying to me. I have no idea what the students are doing who are so supposedly sitting there. And I'm just curious about how you think COVID has changed education and your thoughts about, virtual classes versus in-person classes.
Sure. 2 or 3 things. One, I want to commend UMBC and faculty and OIT and professional development for the pivot program and giving faculty additional strategies to use in online education. Number 2, we will find that the level of satisfaction will depend on the discipline. It's been very interesting that in some disciplines, a number of faculty have said, and students, they prefer some courses, online or at least hybrid. In many, people want in-person. They do. The fact is that I remember when a wonderful faculty member here said, we came to teach here because it was in person. There are institutions that are online. That's not who we are. Doesn't mean that in these circumstances we haven't worked to do the best we could. And faculty have worked to be as flexible and adaptable as possible. The pivot program makes a difference. Big difference between the online for children and for the university in the sense that more work is covered, though we still have to see how much has been covered. I think this next period is going to be one of assessment. All right. I do believe that we are moving back to in-person, that things are going to be safer, and it will be mainly in person, though some opportunities for flexibility There is the need because of people who, all things, work, whatever. The idea of some percentage, we decide what might be online, some courses for some faculty, and we will be seeing how that works over the next few years. But your point, I think the most important point is to listen to what people are saying, to what faculty are saying, what they see with students. Is it different by discipline? I think so. Because I've heard in some areas it's almost impossible to do, in some it's not bad, right? It will be improving with time. I will tell you this, a broader question from that. I looked it up. The level of student debt right now is $1.7 trillion in our country. And of those who've defaulted, half are in online for profits. And those are heavily people of color, Black and Latino, and first-generation college, because they see things on TV that look so attractive, and they spend so much more money rather than starting at a community college, much less expensive, for example, right? So, I mean, we have real issues, and the graduation rates in for-profits is under 30%. And even though we say the graduation rate for students in general, four-year institutions or higher education is 60%, that's very misleading. Well under half, perhaps under 40% of minority students graduate in 6 years. And 40% of all higher education students are in community colleges, starting community colleges, and their graduation rates after 150% of the time, that means from 2 years, you go up to 3, is maybe 30%. So I can comfortably say that when you put it all together and you get beyond all the big, rich places where most people are very advantaged, and 90% graduate, you're talking about large numbers well under 40% graduating, and even bigger when you put under 50%. That's the big challenge we have. People come to college, and they do not graduate with a degree, and they're in thousands of dollars of debt. They're worse off than they started, and we don't want to say it, but we have to say it. It's very important. Yes. Another question from anyone? Yes.
President Hrabowski, you mentioned the key word here, hope, a while ago. In the 60s, you remember white flight.
Yep.
Now we have white fright. We are 15 minutes from the epicenter in this country where folks have no hope. And they're infusing money with the building the Kerwin Commission, obviously trying to review the Inner Harbor and improve that. The governor's throwing money. But in the short term, we're in a code red 15 minutes away from our kids.
Yes.
And I'm wondering how education, that's the key, can get in there and help these kids, because there's no hope.
Sure. So you look at the programs that we have right now, from the choice program that we've worked with 10,000 families over the last 30 years, first-time offenders, nonviolent crimes, between the ages of 8 and 16, all right? So we have large numbers of children on this campus every night. We work with them 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And we have a partnership with the Department of Juvenile Services. When you look at our Sherman Scholars Program to prepare teachers to go into the city and work in challenging schools, in pre-K, big issue, and then middle school teaching. And then the work that our different faculty members are involved in, involving helping out in schools. The dean actually was the founding parent of a school for boys in the city. Baltimore Collegiate School for Boys, right? Sent our own child there. So a lot of people here work in the city, using humanities and the arts and the social sciences in research and clinical teaching types of experiences to prepare students to be professionals in the city. And we work with certain communities. As I said, that Lakeland community, we're all over there. We've got money from Northrop Grumman. Betsy Sherman just gave us $21 million to focus on these issues in early childhood and teachers. So large numbers of faculty and staff and students are working in the city. It is a model that we want to replicate. Other schools are doing, universities are doing things. My point is, same thing I say about the TED Talk, evaluation matters. You can be doing things, but does it make a difference? So I know before COVID, we had gotten those Black and Latino and poor white children at Lakeland up to the state average. Huge, huge amount. Now, that means about half were proficient in reading compared to 20% in Baltimore City. You get what I'm saying? So I'm saying a long way to go, but we had gotten them up there. Now we started last summer working with them in person and hybrid and in person to start rebuilding those skills because they lost ground. Okay, but we have a model now involving getting people into the classrooms to help the teacher. Teacher can't deal with 25 kids at one time. They need others there helping them out along the way, right? And we see the difference we're making. We really do. We just need much more of that. And it's the teeth in this. When you think about it, it's connecting universities and school systems. I mean, I love the fact that we've got a number of our music graduates working with Orchids program. And that's not only in inspiring them with Orchids, which is a program out of the symphony, with our first Orchid person who's here now, I'm very proud of that, but most important for those children to see really impressive students of all races who are experts from their perspective in music, who will tell them, but you got to learn to read too, right? If that I go back to reading and writing for everything. Even as a math teacher, I'm saying reading and writing first. Give me a child who can read and write, I can teach you to solve a word problem. Very important. But your point is well taken, really is. Hey,
Jeffrey. So you opened with a poem, talked about the story of your mother reading. You just mentioned reading right now. What are you reading right now?
Je parle français, monsieur. Je dis le français. Let's finish off. Everybody knows I'm studying French. Qui parle français? Oui. Je parle français. Mon professeur Landry Dijon est un originaire de Normandie. Il est très difficile. Some of you know when I started with my students several years ago, they said, don't you think you're kind of old? That was all I needed to hear. So no, j'étudie le français chaque jour, every day. And he gives me, il envoie les citations. And je dois traduire les citations. Monsieur Hugo, Mademoiselle Simone Beauvoir, Monsieur Frantz Fanon, qui est très difficile. So I'm studying French philosophy every day. I really am. And this is what I've learned. 2 or 3 things. Number one, you never stop learning. I love students correcting mon prononciation, right? But I also appreciate the fact that there's no such thing as saying, oh, he's good in languages or she's good. No, it's the work you put in. And it's the attitude, and it's believing that it's important. And for me, it's not just the language, it's the culture. I look at French culture influence, the influence in different African countries. I work with a number of African countries, qui parlent français, and the presidents are so impressed when I can speak some French, right? And I'm always saying, si vous parlez lentement, je peux comprendre. Just speak slowly, not like the Parisian, right? And what I'm saying is this, that the most important message to me, though, is that language is so complicated that even when you can translate something into the words, there are subtext, there are context, there are influences from the culture, and you can miss the point. T.S. Eliot said about somebody once that they had the experience but missed the point. And so you can translate it into English and still have no idea of what they're saying, right? But it makes me more respectful of language itself. And it makes me better at speaking English even, quite frankly. It really does. So no, every day I'm reading French. I am reading a book that Lisa gave me recently, Strength to Strength. It's an interesting book about, it's a fascinating book about this next part of life and how we high achievers have a really hard time giving up what we've been doing. And the good news for me is because I've been advising presidents for years and I've seen how people have had a fit, I mean, really hard to give it up, right? I am so prepared. I have 90 days as of today. All right? I am so happy for the new president. That's why I was dancing out there. I wanted people to know how excited I am for her and everything. But most important, I know the things I'll be doing to coach and support other presidents. And so I can leave this campus feeling UMBC is inside of me. That's what you're saying, right? I mean, right? It's always here, right? Don't have to be it physically. We are part of that community. So when I'm up at MIT, I'll be looking, I'm going to find my colleagues, right? For sure. But great question. Great question.
Hi, Freeman, Maria Jose here. First, I wanted to thank you for everything, but one of the things that students ask me all the time is how do I, maintain positive and keep my energy up and, to get them to work and to be inspired to do what they do.
Yes.
And I think one of the things I have been lucky this last 17 years is that every time I hear you speak, I just get a bump of energy to keep doing what I do. So if you could give us some advice.
Sure.
in terms of how to keep doing that for our students,
Yes.
that, now it's a little bit harder than ever. And so maybe it's more of a personal level question, but how do you maintain, that positivity and that energy?
Sure.
And some tips for the future.
Sure, I appreciate that. I start with the notion that we have to take care of ourselves. This is what, believe it or not, this program I've been working in for years with new presidents from public and private universities. They're always saying, how do you stay positive when you're really feeling a lot of doubt, or you're feeling negative, or everybody's telling you their problem, and you want to go blah, 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 and you can't go blah, 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 right? And I say this, you start with yourself, how good you feel about yourself, that sense of self. And not about being cocky, but about saying, wow, I've got this chance to work with all these students and colleagues for this noble cause. To me, it's about the nobility of education. And I just think about, I'm looking at all of you sitting there, faculty, senate folks and others, the idea of, what makes UMB so healthy is that so many people get involved in governance, shared governance. And I can honestly say this, looking around the room from chairs and programs and faculty and people who came here as assistant professors, and when John Jeffries told me about somebody, when I said to him, I'm watching to see what happens in history, and I see people going up all the ladder for history and what you've done for people, and Marty Lane tells me, you be sure to take care of it, talk about young faculty and history and everything still. The idea that all of us have grown together. Orianne and I talked about this. Susan's about to be all of us have grown together. Everybody in here. When Daphne said, she reminded me that she couldn't find a parking space and she was coming from New Jersey and everything. The stories we've got, all kinds of stories. And it's the stories that inspire us. It's the stories that inspire us. It really is. It seems to me, it is the challenges and the tragedies that give us the resilience. Every time we've gone through grief of any kind or illness with someone, it's so painful. And yet we see others. I can tell you stories of 50% of the people of grief they've gone through. And we go through it together. And there's something about going through the suffering with people that strengthens the bonds. That people are here for me, not only when the bad times come, or when the good times come, but when the bad times come. And that strengthens me. And then I always go back to the children in Baltimore City. I love the question about what happens in Baltimore City. And I think about the children who are not learning to read. And I see the little kids coming on our campus. And I see when somebody will say, why does he look so mean, a 9-year or 10-year? And I say, you have no idea what he's been through already. You have no idea what he's been through to survive. And if he looked soft, people would kick his butt. That's real. That's very real. Greatest story, so many times it takes a kid being here for months to smile, to be able to laugh or smile. Before that, you taught to be hard, okay? And then they're helping the next little kid. And I'm walking down, and the kid who's smiling is the one that's showing him around. He knows UMBC now, and he's 12 or 13. And he said, that's the president. And the little mean-looking kid goes, president of what? He said, president of UMBC, and the little mean kid said, he ain't no president of this white school. Wait a minute. That's his first. And he looks at me, he says, you black, right? I said, look at me. You black, right? So then he tells him my name, and he said, well, I know that's not you now. I know Hrabowski, right? I have to get a name card out and my license and show them the both, all right, before they will believe I'm the president of this university. Then they want to know, are you rich? But, and the point is, so many children have never seen the possibilities and have not felt seen or heard. And that's what I love about UMBC. We're teaching our students to hear those voices, to see that child, and to support people on this campus. I'll never forget when several students said to me, sometimes when I'm on the bus stop, and this is not our international students, and I'm going into Baltimore City, it just looks to me like people are looking down on me because I don't have a car. And it just crushed me. I had never thought about that we need to think about how we look at people, right? And how people might feel if they're coming here without a car when they see most students with cars. So just the idea of putting ourselves in the shoes of somebody else. and think about it. It seems to me those are the things that keep me feeling, oh, my God, I've got so much. And then finally, let me say mental health. Some of you know I'm doing Tai Chi and acupuncture and the 10,000 steps a day, and eating my salads and vegetables and fruits, and meditating and using the Calm app. All those are real. The more stress we have, the more active approaches we need to support ourselves. Very important, very important. Long answer. Is that the last one?
I think so.
Great. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Thank you. Oh. Thank you. This is great. I enjoyed it. Long live the humanities.